homes, he would talk to Linda, and then when Viv took homes, he would talk to Linda. Like, she was just the rock. She was like the most sane person out of the whole group of them, and she kind of always tried to do what's best for each one. So she was kind of my favorite character.
Wow. You mentioned something. She was the sanest one. Can you mention a specific maybe thing she says or does, particularly at the end? Or
Yeah, so she knows Willow is just kind of about to like end himself. She knows what a fragile state he's in, and so when after the dinner with like Viv, Happy, and Willie, when Willie comes home, she gets mad at Viv because she knows how fragile Willie is, because she knows like what state he's in. So she knows that he's not okay, and how what he needs and what help he needs, and so she kind of reprimands him, and so she kind of knows what's going on and knows how to help the best way.
I don't remember who she's talking to. Maybe about Ben. She doesn't see Ben. Ben is part of his imagination, but she said something about basically defending average. You know, and I think that was her point of view. It's okay to be, you don't have to conquer the world. I go back and forth on that. I think, you know, that's what makes, I guess, men have that in them. You know, it's a flaw, but you know, that's part of makes men men. I guess they want to conquer. You know, you're competing and everything. But she said, why can't he be happy just being average? You know, he got a family. I also kind of agree with that. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I think there's a quote on 96 that says, "I've got to get some seeds right away. Nothing's planted. I don't have a thing in the ground." And I think that like kind of shows the arc of the story, like if people about the story of his life, how he hasn't really. He seems to have like he's worked really hard to kind of build up this salesman thing that he's got going in his relationship with his son, his relationship with his wife. But in the end, it doesn't really, like, he doesn't have anything planted. Nothing is produced by labor.
But I don't know if you were complimenting him on that. Were you complimenting him on the idea that he has nothing planted? Is he like aware of the fact that he hasn't produced any?
I think, I was just thinking the author is being kind of ironic here, where he's saying, Willie has the line saying that he doesn't have anything planted, and he doesn't realize that his whole life has been like that.
Yeah, good. I mean, that's a good point. We'll go over here to Owen and we'll come back. Yeah, good.
I thought it was interesting when Willie was making the garden in the dead of night. I thought that was really, it was like the mark of just total ruin, because like, it was almost like, I don't know how to describe it, but it was almost like a kid who was like mad at their parents who told them to do something, so he wants to rebel as much as possible, and finally he ends up doing it. Because like there's like he just, not everything was going right in his head, because he was making a garden in the dead of night, and I thought it was just really, he was just like teetering on a hill, and he was about to fall off, and it was about to get worse somehow from there. So it was, me reading that was like definitely marking like the climax and going into the end.
Well, you're right? I mean, that was the end for him. I mean, that was his last desperate effort. We'll go back here, we'll go back over here. Good.
I think it's interesting to see Happy and Biff's different like perspectives on how they should treat their father. Because Willie is harder on Biff, but Biff will tell his father the truth. Whereas later on in the story, Happy like advises Biff to tell Willie that Oliver's thinking over the idea of like giving him money, and then also Happy's kind of like ashamed of his father, and he's like ideas to lie about things, so he tells the girls in the restaurant that he's not actually their father. So I just think it's interesting to see that like Happy likes to lie about things, and he kind of like flies under the radar, but Biff doesn't really care. He'll tell you the truth even if it makes someone angry.
I think you're right. Was it Happy that said Biff was the quarterback of the New York Giants? Of course, he asked him, do you know anything about football?
I can't remember.
Yeah, but it sounds like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's a big joke for Happy. He's still kidding around. Yeah.
I thought it was kind of like weird how Willie was so hung up on naming his boss. What's his name? Howard, yeah. When he got fired, and it was also kind of weird that he brought it up to use it as an excuse to get, like, to him. Like, I mean, you could think about it, but it's one thing, but then another thing to tell it to the guy's face, like, to try to get a raise, like, I named you, is kind of just on another level, I think.
And what does it say about the way Willie looks at life? Like, I was here when you were born, I helped name you. What does that say about what Willie thinks is important?
Just kind of having, like, a authority, or, like, kind of just a higher power, I don't know.
All right,
That was just me looking at it.
let's go, I'll come back. Did you have an answer to that?
Yeah, like he's focused on like material things and like things, like, I guess like worldly things that can get you, well, honestly, like can get you nowhere. Like the fact that you came up with this name has nothing to do with his accomplishments or anything like that.
All right, and I think like some of you still have a comment. David, I didn't want to leave you out. You had your hand up earlier.
I was gonna relate back to what Owen said about planting tonight. So, like, plants are like alive, right? And sometimes like the darkness can be symbolized as, death. So, what I thought of is that, Willie is trying to make something that's dead, his relationship with his son, alive, or come back alive again. And it doesn't work, but he keeps trying and he keeps hoping that, his son can do something with his life and can forgive Willie for what he did, during the affair. So,
And that's the most heartbreaking scene of the whole book to me, that when he finds them together from.
Yeah, I was gonna, well, kind of combine things together, but, so, I think it's just like a common theme throughout the novel, like satisfaction, and like he finds.
Say that again.
Satisfaction, and like where he puts his heart towards things, and so he's like trying to like reconcile his relationship with his son, and then like trying to make a name for himself, but he like puts in the effort, but like he hasn't focused on himself and like what's the like internal issue, and I think like he's continuously being let down, so that's just like creating bigger and bigger voids that he tries to fill, like with the garden scene, like where he's just like planting something that there's no like light to be put on it, because like there's nothing inside of him that's gonna actually like become like grow, and so I think like that like scene with the darkness, and like plants have to have light in order to grow, and he's like created such big voids in his life that it's just like he needs to focus on himself rather than focusing on like his name and his relationship with his son, and then improve himself and then grow.
He put his efforts again in the wrong place at the
Yeah.
wrong time. Yeah.
One scene that really stood out to me was when Willie goes and talks to, what was his name? Charlie and his son, and they like offer him a job, and he turns them down even though he really needs that, because like at that point, it becomes so clear that like, Willie isn't just a failed businessman, he's someone who like has such a specific idea of what success should look like, that he won't even like consider any other options. And I think that ties into what we were saying about when he talks to Howard, and he's like, his response to getting fired is like, I was there when you were born and all that, because like, he thinks that success is something that he can be instead of do, so like,
He can do, what rather than do?
he thinks that it's something he can be.
Be.
That like, he can just be someone who deserves all of this good stuff, be someone who earns things, and that like, by having this reputation that he was there when this guy was born and he's been with this company for so long, that like, he's earned it, instead of thinking about on a smaller scale, like, this company doesn't have a use for me anymore.
And isn't there something about that we would all like? In other words, don't we kind of feel like if you know the guy that runs the store, and like you're related to him in some way, wouldn't he treat me a little better? I mean, that sounds like nepotism. You know what nepotism is, when you hire your own kin or something? But the good side of that is a world where we're trying to help each other, and we have these connections. It's not all numbers in business. You wanna follow up on that?
Yeah, and I realize that's also why like, continuously
Yeah.
Cause like that's what's most important.
And I used to say, well, that's ridiculous, but the more every year I read this, I think they're half right. I mean, doesn't a salesman, would you buy anything from a guy you didn't like? Maybe you would, but doesn't that matter, that you like the guy that's selling you the car? And there's something true about you have to sell yourself, but Willie doesn't, that's only half the truth. The product has to be worth something too. But I think there's something about Willie's approach that I kind of now, yeah, being well-liked is very important to being a good salesman, yeah.
I think, this novel shows a really good idea of what it was like to have the societal pressures of Mascara on you and how it drove Willie, like, into madness. Like, first starting with, he's fired from his job, there's always the societal pressure to be, like, the breadwinner of the family, you're the male, you should provide for your family, and now he can't do that. And then he has dinner with his, he's in the diner with Biff, and then he tells him that he's stolen and he did get the job. So now his prosperity is kind of ruined because now his son is messed up. And then it shows him like having his hallucinations flashbacks with Ben, and he's planting a garden in the middle of the night, and then he actually kills himself. So I just think it shows an interesting perspective on the societal pressure of that era.
I like that term because, and you said, or somebody said earlier about, he has the wrong idea of success, or has only one view of success, and it's not working. And so he's wherever this pressure is coming from, it's not gonna work, because it doesn't work, not completely, that one-sided view. Either one of y'all can go first.
I was gonna add on to what Clay said, the ideals of, like, the family, like, who each person was in the family in that time period. Not only applied to Willie, but I think, like, the whole family in general, like, especially Linda. I think that she saw herself as just kind of the housekeeper, who just kind of, like, is very passive and lets everything, like, slide, to the point where, like, she doesn't, like, intervene when Willie is obviously, like, depressed and suicidal, and she just lets all of, these things that Willie does go, because she just, like, cleans up after him, and, like, is kind of like the ideal housewife, I think.
He's kinda like the what?
She's trying to be like the ideal housewife, and that's why she doesn't, like, try and intervene when Willie needs help.
So you're saying that even Linda, you can't let her off the hook. She's not perfect. Yeah, she has her flaws, even though we kind of sympathize with her and we might even admire her. She still has her flaws. There's things she could have done better. Yeah.
I wanted to kind of bring attention to the fact that Willie takes a lot of things personally, especially when it comes to business. Like when Howard basically fired him, he took it really personally, even though Howard explained to him several times in that scene that it was because there wasn't enough room for him and he wasn't as useful as he used to be. And Howard explains it to him several times in multiple ways that we don't have room for you anymore. And Willie takes it really personally and starts yelling at him, calling him names, and saying, I named you, I was here while you were born. And Willie kind of values that over the fact that it's just business and that there's really no personal reason why he's firing him.
Right.
And I also noticed that when the job offer from Charlie as well, he made it a personal issue rather than understanding that he actually really needed that money for his family and needed that to support himself. But he took that he even made that a personal issue and refused that when he clearly needed it.
Doesn't he take money, but he won't take the job? Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Doesn't he accept money, which is odd to me, because it seemed like the more proud person would, I'm gonna earn it, but Willie doesn't wanna earn it that way, but he doesn't mind taking it, in a handout essentially. Good point. Have we left it, Ian? Have we heard?
No, I haven't. I found, one thing is that in the end, in the Requiem, Charlie was explaining how, salesman is like a super tough job that nobody can really take, and then Biff carries on that it's like, Willie chose the wrong profession when he didn't go with Ben to Alaska to like build stuff with his hands, because all throughout salesman. And then another interesting is that he committed suicide before their family, like right before their family was free from their
Right.
troubles. When Linda was by his grave, like, yeah, we're free now, but you're
And,
gone.
and of course, he even botches that because, why? Why did he commit suicide? That's really important to know why he committed suicide. Yeah.
Was it Ben, or he had some vision of Ben?
Well, certainly Ben seemed to be coaxing him into it.
Insurance policy for.
Yes. And what do we know about that? If you didn't know it, we know it from another book that we read, All the King's Men.
Like $20,000, just get a little bit $20,000.
But he kills himself, so what's the insurance company gonna do? They gonna give that money?
If he had a car accident and it seemed like it wasn't, and like on purpose, then they would still give it to him, right?
Well, that's a good point. But they would investigate it, and you'd have to look at some of the details of the accident, and if they discovered it was a purpose, people would be killing themselves all over the place to get money, for other people, although people are so selfish, I'm not sure you'd kill yourself for somebody else. That happens, so he's even wrong about that. They won't collect any money because they'll figure out it's suicide, yeah.
I think it's kind of like his, I think he finally realized that he is a burden to his family rather than
Yeah.
helping. So he is trying to, again, like what Clay said, provide money for his family, and he doesn't know what to do. So he feels like his only option is like crooked mind is suicide.
Do you remember though why he decides now to kill himself? That could be one of the reasons. Remember, what does Biff do that turns the tide around? He cries and basically for Willie, and Willie says, "That's what I've been waiting for all this time." And he's thinking he's going to do something good for Willie. You ever heard of a movie, Citizen Kane? Anybody ever seen it? You've heard of it? You've heard of it? I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but Orson Welles was a great actor of the 30s and 40s, genius. Anyway, he made the movie and played the part of, he's a real person. He was a newspaper mogul of the 30s, 20s and 30s, Hearst, William Randolph Hearst. You ever heard that name? Anyway, he was one of these giants, and he owned all these newspapers, and the whole movie was about his life. The first scene of the movie is after he had died, and they're burning stuff. And the first scene, his last words before they start burning the stuff, just because they got to sell the house or something. He's on his deathbed, William Randolph Hearst, maybe the most wealthy man in the world at the time. He said the word rosebud, Rosebud. And so this newspaper reporter takes on himself to figure out the mystery of what was Rosebud. So he goes and analyzes that guy's whole life, which is the movie. The movie's a flashback of this guy's life. And at some point, you see William Randolph Hearst is a poor young boy, and he has this sled, and for some reason, the parents were so poor or so unkind or something, they give the sled away. And for the rest of his life, on his deathbed, his last words are Rosebud. Like, he never got over that. He's got like Scarlett O'Hara, "If God is my witness," ever seen this? She's shaking her fist. There's no food to eat. The house is all burned down. She shakes her fist up at heaven and says, "If God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again." And then she becomes this crazy materialist. But at the end of the movie, he never figures it out. And the last thing you see are the guys burning stuff, and they pick up a sled and they put it in the incinerator underneath the house. Who has incinerators? But anyway, this guy does. And you see the picture on the front, it says Rosebud. And the whole movie, it's reminded me of Willie right here. All he wanted was somebody to say, "I love you." Biff. That's all he wanted. And he would have been happy, and he finally is, and it's too late. And it's just interesting how lots of people's lives are based on something like that, they're so tiny and little, you'd think this would motivate this man. I don't know how true that is, but it makes for an interesting movie. Emma Shea, The Pay, I didn't want to leave you guys out.
I was surprised by the lack of character development.
The lack?
Yeah.
That's a good point. What do you mean?
Most of the people in there, especially the family, just kind of, I realized that they were kind of a stubborn family, each individual person was, because instead of being willing to change and to like support each other and help each other become better people, they all kind of like ended for themselves instead of helping each other, which is why I think that they were such like a broken family. and didn't end
Are
up
you
well.
saying, and I think you may be right, does anybody ever change? Well, how would you?
I think, sorry, this is related to that, but, I think it's really interesting, like, what you were saying about how these people don't really change, because I don't think that's really what the play is about. I think so much of it feels so inevitable, because you weren't watching these people grow and change, you're watching these already established characters who have, like, so many years of things that have shaped them as people and so much baggage, and now, like, it's just putting all the places and just watching what happens, and it feels like nothing else could have happened.
That's a good point. I think you're right about, that's the point of the book, the self-destructive lifestyle caught up with, and their philosophy and the way they live. And this is a book about that. But you're right, most books, you judge it on how well the characters change or how much they change. But he does this on purpose. He could have got them to change. He could have had a completely different ending, but you're right. Patty.
Personally, I really like reading Death of a Salesman, just because, one, I like reading plays, and then two, it basically shows that what somebody thinks is the American dream actually destroys you as a person, because
Yeah.
Willie was living this life that ended up destroying his mental state. And one thing that I don't wanna say I enjoyed reading it, because that just sounds mean, but throughout the entire play, you can see his mental status slipping
Yeah.
until he becomes more and more childlike.
Yeah.
And one thing that really pointed out to me was, he was talking to, I'm pretty sure it was Biff, and Biff said like G, and Willie said, don't say G, that's a kid's word. And then.
Don't whistle in the elevator.
And then the entire, even like a couple pages after that, and then the entire act 2, Willie says G so many times.
Yeah.
And then one thing I also found interesting is, it was Biff, Bernard, Charlie, and maybe Howard all referred to Willie as kid, even though he's like a 68-year-old man maybe. And so it's just, and they're looking after him more, and a lot of the times Brenda also says like, and it also might be happy with like you're trying to keep him happy, like you're a child.
Yeah.
And then he's going to Charlie to get money, like a teenager would go to their parents to ask them for like
Yeah.
gas money
Mhm.
or something, and so he's becoming more and more childlike. And I just-
That's another good point. And as we finish, we got about 5 minutes. So what did you learn about what's wrong with the American dream? It is the issue of our time. Really, news every day is about what is America? We're going through a midlife crisis as a country. Who are we? What are we? And what is the promise of America? He got it wrong to some degree, but where was, what's his name, Bernard, where was he headed when Charlie saw him? The Supreme Court. Here's a guy that, in high school, he was smart, but he was liked, but not well liked. And this guy has made something of it, like Charlie has made something. So what is the American promise? What do we offer?
Opportunity.
I believe that. Now, obviously, there are things that prevent opportunities, and we should have a society that allows people, and we have lots of examples of people who can go to the top. But having opportunity to do things, I think it's what we are. We want to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity, not an equal outcome. The outcome we cannot determine, but does everybody have an opportunity? at least that's the goal. Do you remember Dave Singelman? Does that name ring a bell? Dave Singelman was the old man in the train who died. You know, all he had to do was pick up a phone. I don't think he existed. I think he was a figment of Willie's imagination. But that was his goal. That's why he wanted to be a salesman, because he thought that was what a salesman is. You're so well liked, so well respected. All you do is pick up a phone, you got 100 orders. That is an illusion. Can I read you one last thing here? This is why I've sort of changed my mind about Willie a little bit. It's on page well, it's not on 138, but it's right near the last, it's in the Sikh Requiem. I just want to read this. This is Charlie defending Willie. What do you think of this? He says, Biff said he never knew who he was. He had all the wrong dreams. And Charlie says, nobody dare blame this man. He's defending Willie. That is Charlie. You don't understand. Willie was a salesman. And when it comes right down to it, you've got to figure out why is this book about a salesman? What's the symbolism of a salesman? And this helps us. And for a salesman, there is no rock bottom to life. He don't put a bolt to a nut. He don't tell you the law, or give you medicine. He's a man way out there in the blue, riding on a smile and a shoe shine. And when they start not smiling back, that's an earthquake. And then you get yourself a couple of spots on your hat and you're finished. Nobody dares blame this man. A salesman has got to dream, boy. It comes with the territory. And there's something just like eminently American about the idea of a salesman. I think of the cowboy in the West. You go out into the unknown, the frontiersman. You don't know what's going to happen. You may die, you may not, but you have a dream. And so that's the problem with Willie. That's all he had. But don't take that away from him. You've got to have dreams. I just think that's really well said. Thank you. Have a good weekend. And I hate to say it, but I don't have a book to give you. I actually do have a book to give you, but I'm not going to give it to you. I ran out of books. You want a book? Got a bunch of books. Yeah.
And I was wondering if we're having any more.
We will.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know we were supposed to read one day, and so then I came in, I was
Oh,
like,
so kind of easy.
okay.
You know, once this thing goes on the fifth,
Okay.
I usually do some things that will make up for that.
Okay.
I have a question. Tech.
Yes.
What's it about tech?
So my dad is from Texas, and then he grew up there, and we have friends there and stuff, so we go there at least like once a
Is
year.
that a possibility for you?
Yeah, so, yeah, I went like last week, so.
Yeah, everything in Texas is bigger, including the schools.
Yeah.
We were, I visited offices.
Oh, yeah, this is an office, so.
Anyway, I believe.
I know, it's I don't know if I really that big, but I saw some other schools that I didn't see, so.
I just think that's cool. I don't think you've ever had a, I think you've had some good data.
Yes, I know someone here in the Baylor, I do know that. I looked at Baylor, I like it.
It's a little smaller.
It's a little bit smaller, but it's,
What a freak town.
yeah, it's a really big community.
Anyway, yeah, we will have some other ideas.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't think that,
And then we'll have like a, are we gonna have a test? And Taylor also
I don't, but what I'd like to make you is
Yeah.
I don't think you got Yeah, we can do it.
You can have it for you.
Yeah, you just like
Okay, go.
nostalgic.
No, I really feel like one thing, like societal pressure,
That's good. Okay, yeah. I can do that. Perfect. Thanks. You just say it. No one else is saying that. What did you say? What? Societal pressure driven great. You have it. I've read them. Okay. I know didactic kind of dividend, modest or sharp. Elegiac was referring to elegy. Lugubrious is somber but over exaggerated. Pedantic is attention to detail. Excessively concerned. Flippant, shutting it off. Patronizing, belittling, contentious. I don't even know how to
This
like,
thing
say that
is
word,
when
but
it's only
controversial.
It's only understandable by
Intelligently and
Yeah.
so it's kind of the same thing as pedantic.
inner circle.
Pedantic?
You're right.
No, pedantic is usually insulting.
The other people. Yeah.
Effusive.
Am I wrong?
Effusive is not.
Contentious.
Controversial.
Expressing gratitude and dividend.
Wait, why did you
You can tell me if you didn't.
I didn't write that.
Hey!
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I had been,
Sorry,
you want to say,
Make it worse as you go.
they ought to get better. What kind of order are they? The order you wrote them or the order you reported?
The opposite order that I wrote them.
Okay. All I can say is keep writing. Because, you know, kind of approach it. You want to improve your skill, everybody does.
He had just
Gotta admit it. I'm really impressed with your writing.
We should do one in class.
You know, we'll have some time. I have a couple of more creative assignments. All right, well, I do have a quiz. It's multiple choice, so it's not gonna take you that long. We did have a good discussion of the book. Between those two things, the quiz and the discussion, we're usually short, about 10 minutes, so it's a shorter period, which is fine. But I have this, what do they call it, a worksheet you're gonna need to know how you did on that test yesterday. In terms of how many you got right. Out of the 55, that's the one number you gotta work with. And so it's a way to calculate with a little bit of imagination, because we didn't write the essay. So you have to kind of guess, like, what you'll end up doing if you can plug in some numbers for the essay up to 9. You can figure out, like with a score like this multiple choice score that I just got, what would I have to do on the essays to, get a 3, 4, or 5? We heard some interesting things. Ian was calculating, and a couple interesting, I like the fact that they were trying to strategize it. But they were pointing out, if you can get half of them right, you don't have to do terribly. I thought it was kind of low myself, but he said, I'm just telling you what Ian said, that all you have to do is make 15 points. In other words, 5s on each one of the essays. You can still get a 3. I never figured it that way. When I calculated it, I never got that. If that's true, then that's, to me, that's very hopeful, because I bet money on you that all of you would do better than that. But I still think doing as best that you can on this test, on the multiple choice, which you kind of have less control over, and then you can really knock it out of the park, hopefully, with your essay. What was the other thing? He made a good point, too. This is Ian again. Like, you have 3 essays. What if you didn't do one essay, and you spent 40, let's see, you just did 2 essays. You didn't literally do anything but write your name on one of the essays. You spent all your time, 2 hours, which is an hour each, on 2 essays. And you knock those out of the park, like 2 9s, that's 18. Or you could do all 3 and maybe not do as well, and you got to say all 6s. Well, all 6s and 2 9s, 3 6s and 2 9s is the same thing. So I don't know. His point was, surely you're not gonna just leave one blank. And so there are just different ways to look at it, maybe ways to think about it. To me, that's kind of I like that because it feels like this is this monolithic thing that it's just so hard to tame, you know, particularly the multiple choice. So, when you finish the quiz and everybody's done, I'll give you this thing you can calculate a score. You do need to know how many you got right. And we'll be practicing more of those. So anyway, I thought I'd share that. I know they probably are there games today? Okay. Soccer and baseball. Anything else? All right, so let me pray. Father, bless these students as we finish out this week. Seems like we just got here. They say that about the first day of school too. It's been a quick year. It's been one of the hardest years any of us have had. But here we are. So I just pray that you bless how we end, especially as these students take their big test. And it's not just this one, they have other APs and of course end of year exams, and just pray that they end well. And if anybody will, they will, because they're that kind of students. They're not gonna give up or let up until it's over. And that's the best way to approach this. I pray for that, pray for this, pray that they have, the games are safe, then people get there and enjoy them and do their best. I also pray for that they have a church that they can attend on Sunday, and in obedience with their family, in obedience with you, to you and your command, and the blessings that will come from that. So bless this time together in Christ's name, amen. So if you put everything away, I don't need to.